Alright, we are ready to begin our next lesson. Today's learning goal is that students will be able to use patterns with fractions and mixed numbers. You may remember that we've already done patterns with decimals, and so we're going to review some terminology first. So the first thing is a sequence, which is just an ordered list of numbers. The term is each number in the sequence. The interval is the value between the terms in the sequence. And we know that patterns can occur when that interval repeats within the sequence. So we're going to review the procedure again. This time it's a little bit different because we have fractions. The first step is definitely different. What we're going to do is we're going to find the least common denominator, and we're going to find equivalent fractions for each of the fractions that's in our sequence. After we do that, we're going to find the interval, or the space in between each of the terms. And then if we are required to, as part of the problem, we're going to find the unknown terms. So let's do a sample problem. In that sample problem, we're going to find the interval, or sometimes it's called the rule, of the following sequence: 3 1/2, 4 5/6, 6 1/6, and 7 1/2. Okay, so I've gone ahead and written down the problem. We are finding the interval, and the first thing, or the first step that we need to do, is find a common denominator. Now we're going to use the same way that we did when we were adding and subtracting fractions to find the common denominator. We're going to start with the largest denominator. In this case, the largest denominator is 6. And we're going to see if each of the other denominators will go into that evenly. So we look, we have 2. Does 2 go into 6? Yes, it does. So we're looking good there for the 6. Over here, we have another 2. So we know that 2 goes in there. So we're going to use 6 as our common denominator. And now we're going to rewrite each of our fractions as an equivalent fraction. So well, for the 2 that didn't change, we just keep the same numerator. So we can put the 5 on the top of this one and the 1 on the top of this one. For the ones that do change, what times 6 gives you, or sorry, what times 2 gives you 6? Well, that's times 3. And if we do times 3 on the bottom, we have to do times 3 on the top. 1 times 3 is 3. Same thing over here. Times 3 on the bottom, times 3 on the top, means we have 3 on the top. So we found the equivalent fractions for each of our fractions. We all have the same denominator here. And so now we need to find the interval. You'll remember we find the interval by subtracting the larger interval, or the larger term, by the smaller term. So 4 5/6, subtracting 3 3/6. So we'll do that right here. Since we've already got the same denominator, we don't have to change the denominator. So we subtract like we normally would. 5 minus 3 is 2. Keep the same denominator, and then subtract the whole number part of our answer. 4 minus 3 is 1. Well, we can simplify the 2 6, and so we know that that's equal to 1/3. So let's see if the interval is the same for the next one. So we're going to do 6 1/6 and 4 5/6. This time we cannot do 1 minus 5. We have to borrow. So we're going to cross out the 6 and make it a 5. We're going to add 6, 6, which is going to become 7, 6. Bring over the 5, 6. Now we subtract like we normally would. 7 minus 5 is 2. Keep the denominator. Subtract the whole number. 5 minus 4 is 1. So again, we have 1 and 2, 6. We can simplify that to 1/3. So the interval looks like it's going to be 1 and 1/3. So let's do a second sample problem. In this second problem, we're going to find the interval and the unknown terms for the sequence that they've given us. Okay, so here is the sequence of numbers. We have 3 unknown values that we need to find. And then we also need to find the interval in order to help us find those unknown terms. So the first step that we said is we need to find a common denominator. So we look across and we see what's the largest denominator that we have, and that is 16. We have 3 of them here. So we see, can the other denominators go into them evenly? If not, then we'll have to find the next multiple to see if that works. So does 4 go into 16? Yes, it does, 4 times. Does 8 go into 16? Yes, it does, 2 times. And so our greatest common denominator is going to be 16. So we're going to find equivalent fractions for each of our fractions using the denominator 16. So we do 4 times 4, which means we have 3 times 4. So we have 12 sixteenths. That one's already in sixteenths. 8 times 2. So we go 3 times 2, which is 6. This is already in sixteenths. Then we're going to have our unknown terms. This one's already in sixteenths. And then 4 times 4 makes this times 4. And so we have 4 sixteenths there. So we've converted all of our fractions into equivalent fractions that all have the same denominator, and now we can look for the rule. So we'll start off with the larger of the two. In this case, the larger of the two is the first one. And so we'll have 1 and 12 sixteenths, and we'll subtract 1 and 9 sixteenths. So 12 minus 9 is 3. Keep the same denominator, and 1 minus 1 is 0. So it looks like our interval could be 3 sixteenths. Let's do the next one and see. So we're going to do, this is the next larger one, so we're going to do 1 and 9 sixteenths. And we're going to subtract 1 and 6 sixteenths. 9 minus 6 is 3, keep the 16. 1 minus 1 is 0. And so again, we see that that interval is 3 sixteenths. So we're going to go with the interval being 3 sixteenths, but we notice that we're starting with the larger number and our numbers are getting smaller. So that indicates to us that we are subtracting 3 sixteenths. So when the sequence gets smaller, that means that the interval is subtracting. So let's find the first of our unknown values. We're going to do that by taking the next term, which is 1 and 3 sixteenths, and we're going to subtract, because that's what our rule is, the 3 sixteenths that we just found. 3 minus 3 is 0 over 6. 1 minus nothing is 1. Well, we know that 0 over anything is still 0, and so the term that goes here is going to be the number 1. Let's find the next unknown value. So we have the number 1, and we're going to subtract 3 3/16. Alright, well, there's nothing here, there's no fraction here, so we're going to have to borrow, so we're going to have to change the 1 to a 0, and we're going to turn it into a fraction, which is 16 over 16. Now we can subtract. 16 minus 3 is 13. Keep the same denominator. 0 minus nothing is still 0. And so our next one is going to be 13/16. So now we have one more unknown term that we have to find. So we're going to take our 13/16 and we're going to subtract our 3/16. That is our interval. 13 minus 3 is 10. Keep our 16, which is our denominator. And then we notice that we can simplify. We can divide both of these by 2. And so 10 divided by 2 is 5. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And so the simplified answer is 5/8. And so we found the interval, which is subtracting 3/16, and we found the three unknown terms, which are 1, 13/16, and 5/8. Alright, so now it is time to do your own practice problems. Go on to Moodle, do the practice problems for tonight's homework. Once you finish that, then make sure that you rate yourself on our scale and write that at the heading of your notes. And then bring any questions or concerns that you have to class tomorrow, and we'll talk about them in class. Have a great evening.